All right, let's get started here. What we'll do is I'm going to share a quick couple slides here on MotherDuck, and then we will hop into some lightning talks, and then we'll have a panel discussion. So I'm really, really excited to see the crew here. I'm going to do a quick screen share about what MotherDuck is and how we think about ourselves here at MotherDuck, and we will do an intro for our panelists. So let's get into it. Thanks, everybody. All right. Cool. So quick intro about what we're up to at MotherDuck. MotherDuck is a cloud data warehouse built for the post big data era. And so I want to quickly talk about what that means. Well, as it turns out, when a lot of the things that were currently built that you've all used and know and love, like BigQuery, for example, in 2006, the top laptop had 1 core and 2 gigs of RAM. Today on a MacBook Pro, you can get 40 cores and 36 gigs of RAM. And of course, our EC2 instances are even bigger, like 448 cores and 24 terabytes of RAM. So what this means is that now we have a lot of power available on one machine, and the amount of data that we thought we were going to see ended up being much smaller for analytical data sets than what the projections looked like in about 2006. And so we built a data warehouse built on top of DuckDB that has built in that new paradigm. There's a couple of proof points here, right? There's some research, but really what we're thinking about is building data warehousing and analytics for 99% of businesses. It's serverless, it accelerates business value, it's built on DuckDB, which is an amazing analytics, research-driven analytics library. So with that said, let's do some quick intros. I am Jacob Matson, and I am one of the dev advocates here at MotherDuck, along with Mehdi, who is here too. Mehdi, do you want to say hi and quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm also a data engineer and developer at MotherDuck, and I've been doing data engineer for more than a decade, actually, now. Time's fly.
That's funny. Thanks, Mehdi. Evelyn, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Evelyn Wu. I'm a data engineer at Notion.
Awesome. Thanks, Evelyn. Archie, you want to quickly run through here?
Hi. Yeah, I run the go-to-market team at Evidence. But before that, I ran the BI team at a company called Patch in London.
Excellent. Thank you, Archie. And last, we have Nate here on the panel.
Hey, yeah, I'm Nate. I work at 1Password, just joined about a month ago to manage the revenue operations analytics squad. So we call ourselves the insights team. Previously was at Smartsheet for several years, running the analytics engineering team and other pieces there. So been all over the data stack.
Cool. Thank you, Nate. Really appreciate it. All right. So with that being said, we're going to hop into the first part of our session today, which is lightning talks. And so we're going to really talk about how we find AI to be useful today and what this means for kind of us as we think about different personas. And I think up first we have Archie.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, really, really excited to be here today. I'm actually personally, the MotherDuck team reached out to say, can you do a lightning talk? And I said, of course, but personally, actually really excited to hear some of the other ones that are coming up as well. I think they sound really interesting. So today I'm going to talk about how I use Cursor to improve like my speed of iteration when I'm working on data projects and particularly on data apps. It's been a pretty transformational tool for me. I downloaded it sometime in 2024, having, until then been primarily using, like hosted chat as my main interface with LLMs. So, like ChatGPT or Anthropic's chat-based interfaces. And I've been, I guess, like continually surprised by how good this is. So this is going to be a screen share. this is Cursor. If you're familiar with VS Code, it's going to feel very similar. It's actually, built on top of VS Code. And the kind of the difference here is that you have you just have more context that you're able to give the LLMs than if you're using like a chat-based solution, where you kind of have to, every time you start a chat, you have to say, this is the code I'm working on, and this is what I've got from it. Quick intro to like, I guess, what evidence is, and the reason that is I'm going to talk about how I use Cursor with evidence, but Cursor is honestly a great tool for writing any kind of code. So evidence is a BI tool that allows you to version control your reports. So you write kind of Markdown with these special components, and then you get sort of BI based output. So you know what? I actually need to share my whole screen so that you can see my browser as well. There we go. Okay, so here I have got this page. I go home, and this Markdown is producing this page here. So I've got like a title, this like details component here, which is being populated here. Anyway, I'm not really here to talk about evidence. I'm in here to talk about Cursor. So let me do that. So the thing that I think makes this really unique is that it already knows about everything in your code base. So I can do something. I'm going to pop open the chat window. I'm going to create a new one and say, okay, I want to create a deep dive page about orders. And you know what? I'm going to change that, and because I forgot to include the docs. So the other thing that's kind of nice here is that you can include like extra context. And one of the things I've done here is I've loaded the evidence docs into Cursor, and you can do that really easily. You just point the URL where your docs are hosted, and it indexes the website for you. So I've just added that. Clear and revert. Okay, so now it's going to have another go. And if I just make this a little bigger for a bit. So it starts by like finding what's in your code base, and it's kind of going to do like a different mission every time. In this case, it's generated me a new page here, and it's created some components. So this is this page that is generated, and it's also kind of uses this sort of like diff style visualization to help you understand like what it's changed, and you can have a test of it before you look at it. So let's go see like if the page that is generated is working. Orders deep dive. I mean, okay, so it generated all of this code to make this page on its own, and it worked first time, which I was actually kind of surprised about. I was hoping that it would throw some errors so that I could then use some of the tools to show how fixing errors, but I guess I can do some other stuff here. So it's like in natural language. Okay, so this chart's kind of screwed up because I can't see any of the item labels and the state names. So let me see if I can correct that. I can't see any of the items on the state axis. Can we put it on the y-axis instead? So let's have a go at that. Nope, not done that very well. Let's go have a look at what it's done. So I'm going to accept where it is at the moment, so I can then see what it's changing. Sales by state. Sales by state.
Check your spelling on sales.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Docs, evidence, syntax. or orientation. What? Well, this doesn't want to time it. I actually have to know what the right syntax is for this, which is swap x, y. It's true. It's bad. Okay, so I've managed to fix this myself. There you go. All right. Well, so that's kind of the main interface with Cursor. So you're using this this kind of chat interface. There's also this Command K interface where you go here and you go add title to this chart. Awesome. And then it's just generated that for me. So those kind of the two main things.
All right, thank you, Archie.
I think I'm out of time.
Yeah. That was really cool. Thanks for showing us kind of how you can use a AI assistant kind of within a coding workflow there as it relates to BI. That's really cool to see. All right, Nate, we have you up next here on what you're up to.
Sounds great. Yeah, I love seeing that, Archie, the cursor. I right now I'm going to ChatGPT over here and doing other pieces, so it's inspiring me to go take a look at that, I think, a little bit later. So that's really cool to see. My use case, so I have worked for many years on go-to-market teams, both on the go-to-market side as a customer success rep, and now I'm in the analytics side. So on go-to-market, it's a unique set of analytics problems. A lot of times CRM hygiene, like Salesforce records, is a big deal for those go-to-market squads. The data is hard to get. There's a lot of tools people buy and integrate in to try to get, I don't know, headquarters information, employee counts, revenue, like all the kind of typical ways you'd cut an account for territory creation, for lead routing, all that kind of stuff. So historically, that's been really manual to clean. My first time at Smartsheet several years ago, we just all split it up and said, hey, everyone, take 20 accounts at a time. Every morning when you come in, drink your coffee, update 20 records, and we'll keep our records updated that way. Was quite literally the way we did it. Recently with LLMs now, I had a chance to experiment with updating records using logic with an LLM. And so this is a use case coming from an actual like real life. I got to use it within Snowflake. So I was actually inspired by Jacob tweeted out showing in MotherDuck and DuckTV that you could use LLMs in SQL. And I said, wait, Snowflake has this, I think. And I had access to it. So I went over there and it was a chance to, so I'll give kind of the world of how you do it. And I have I'll actually share kind of the end queries I put together. This is a preview for, I'll go more in depth in it at Data Council here in a couple of weeks down in Oakland. So this is kind of a preview of a talk there. So within CRMs, industry is the example that I got to actually apply this to. It was to say, where should we go in the market? What industry should we tackle? Where do we sell well was kind of the general question. And looking at the data, if you bar charted it out, the nulls were 90% of the accounts. And there was a bunch of, 50 different industries with little bits of it. So really not usable. It couldn't really make a analysis for anybody to go use. So interestingly enough, Snowflake has the ability to choose all sorts of LLMs to go and leverage to fill in that data. So I got to experiment with a bunch of them and come up with some of the better ones to use. A llama model in particular was the one that seemed to have the best results. In terms of a workflow, I'll kind of map out. It's not like you go in and say, hey, here's a bunch of accounts that I have on my CRM, return industries. Like it just doesn't work as easily as you'd want it there. The first piece of advice, and this is typical within the sales world, is you want to first define what industries you want. The LLM, you need to be pretty descriptive to it, prescriptive. So it's not like say, hey, return industries. It will choose an industry, but it won't be necessarily the ones that are usable for your team. So having a mind towards giving it bars to fit industries inside it was crucial. There's 10 or 15 or so that I said, hey, let's go with these 10 or 15 industries would be a great chance to start. And so that gave it kind of boundaries to stay within. When I first attempted to then say, the query literally is you concatenate in whatever you want in your request, the natural language, and then you pass in, I don't know, the name of the account, the domain of the account. You pass in, maybe there's some notes about the account that would be relevant, things like that would help the LLM go and find information about it somewhere on the internet. So when you do that initially, even with a limited set of industries, it will return a sentence back to you. I'm sure all of you have used LLMs, and they come back with a 5-paragraph response. And in that, it'll say construction. Like, I found an industry for, interestingly enough, it's like impossible to parse it out. So there was a bit of prompt engineering required and experimentation to have it return one word, which was great. Eventually got down to like one word or phrase for over 90% of them, which is totally fine to clean up a few stragglers. The problem was it wasn't as accurate as I wanted. So what's really nice is it was really quick to iterate, and I could really quickly say, okay, the key at the end was to bring in the industry description and say, for hospitality, this is what I mean. For construction materials, this is what I mean. And once I did that, the coin dropped in the slot, and all sorts of like the accounts came in like accurately and how I wanted it to be. It was one word, and like the accuracy was pretty dang good. So I'll show kind of the actual query that I wrote as a preview, as well as a chance to see kind of the results of it. I did a test data set I live a little north of Seattle, so of some different companies up around here that's shareable, and it was essentially the same accuracy as I saw when doing it in reality. So this is the query here. Again, it's a little small for some screens here, or if you're on a phone, but I concatenated in, like, here's the list of industries, like here's the definition of each. And then I just passed in company name for the test here, but you can pass in all sorts of CRM fields. Really valuable to be able to do that. And it returned back the company name and the industry from the LLM over here. And for accuracy's sake, I went and checked through, hey, like, how accurate are these? So this is an example of the 25 or 30 that I have here. And this is essentially the same as I saw using a couple thousand accounts in a different scenario for a company. And you can see there's some that are wrong, like Achilles USA was not technology, it was manufacturing industrial. So you can go through and find those. Some of them are like close, but many of them were correct. And these companies in particular are just small ones up here north of Seattle. So there's not really a lot of data online for them. So it gets more and more accurate, I found, the bigger you get, because there's just more information on the internet. But that's just a quick example of being able to use an LLM. There's a lot of ways I want to apply it, a lot of different ways to do it. So I'm exploring that. But I'm really excited the CRM enrichment side of things has always been super manual. And so it's exciting to see this use case.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. That was perfect and right on time. So much appreciated. Obviously, I linked a few things in the chat there, including an article that Nate did about this. And again, I will repeat, he will be at Data Council doing a longer, in-depth version of this, kind of really getting into the weeds on it. Highly encourage you to make it out there if you are in the Bay Area. All right. So next up here, we have Evelyn. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. Oh,
Let's
chef.
do it.
Okay. So, yeah, today I'll be talking about leveraging LLMs for your data catalog. We do this currently at Notion, and I want to show you how. So, you're probably familiar with this problem. You've onboarded your data catalog, you spent a lot of time setting it up. Maybe you've entered like some very engaged negotiations with your third-party vendor, and you have a great contract. But when you actually come to spin up your data catalog and users are using it, they don't find a lot of value from it. And one of the main reasons is because a lot of the metadata isn't filled out. So this may be familiar to you, where you have no table descriptions. You can see here, no documentation yet. In your column descriptions are all missing. And then we have a very sad duck there because stakeholders can't self-serve their data needs. And this is kind of like a feedback loop. So stakeholders can't self-serve their data needs, and then they go to the analyst or data team to try and create their reports. And then the data scientist or the data analyst or whoever owns that data set doesn't have time to fill in the missing descriptions because they're busy with stakeholder requests. So basically, the key takeaway here is that a catalog is only as useful as its metadata. And LLMs can really automate that kind of tedious process out that no one wants to do. So in terms of the description generation process itself, this is quite a simplified diagram, of course. But the key thing here is that when you're supplying the metadata, you need to provide as much context as possible. So at Notion, we provide a SQL, we provide the upstream kind of definitions that we call the JSON schema. We actually ingest internal Notion docs into the LLM as well. We give data types, and another big thing here is that we actually use generated upstream descriptions, and we make sure to ingest that in to the requirements prompt. And that way, you kind of reduce the chance that one table has a given description for a column, and then a downstream table uses the same column. It's just a select star type of thing. And it should have the same description, but it's changed. And providing that kind of metadata of the lineage is super important to prevent that. And then the final thing here is review feedback. And this is quite important because the worst thing you can do is have a description that is incorrect. And stakeholders use that description for their queries, and it turns out they're using it incorrectly. So before we sync any descriptions, they go in for human review, and we have a automated process for that to tag the table owner. And they can make changes or suggestions to the LLM, and then the LLM can regenerate based on their feedback and incorporate that into its memory. So yeah, that's a very quick summary of how it works. There's a lot of details there, but you can view the blog, which I'll link at the end of this chat, if you want more details. So here are some real-world examples. You can see on the left here is a column description. Is first active space member is quite a cryptic kind of column name. Doesn't mean like the date that this member was first active, but it's a Boolean. What does this mean? And you can see the LLM actually passed it out. It's a Boolean flag indicating if the workspace is the first one where the member had an active event based on cross workspace activity. So it's basically, is this workspace the first workspace that had any activity? And that clears things up great and is actually correct. You can see here in the middle here, it's a table description. It's an excerpt from one of our biggest tables, but you can see here it provides a lot of useful and correct examples of how you would want to use this table. And finally, as a counterexample, unfortunately, in this generated description for an example query it provided, it looks good on the surface. It does some cohort analysis and the SQL looks good. But if you actually know about the table, dim or user, it's actually date partitioned. So this will actually scan all date partitions, and it will be a very expensive query. So that's kind of why we need the human review process to kind of prevent stuff like this. So yeah, that's a very quick summary. But if you want to check out more details, scan this QR code on the left. And we have a blog post about it. We're also hiring. If you're interested in an infrastructure position on our team, you can scan this one. And then if you want to connect on LinkedIn, scan the last one here. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Evelyn. That's really cool. I love that, you know, there was a layout and overview of the process there. You know, I think a lot of this is you know, no silver bullets, right? Like, we still need the humans to do the things that only humans can do. And I think that's, you know, some of the promise of how we can leverage AI. Really cool. Do you want to drop the link in the chat as well, Evelyn? That would be really cool. Thank you. All right, Mehdi, are you ready to go?
So yeah, I wanted to talk about specifically developing data pipeline for data engineers. The challenge basically is that the feedback loop for building data pipelines can be actually pretty slow. This is a reference from the great book. If you haven't read it as a data engineer, I would recommend it, from Joris and Matt Housley, Fundamentals of Data Engineering. But basically, as you can see, the data engineering life cycle, you have this box here, the black box, and you have 3 steps. And those steps can be really slow and complicated because that's can be different tools. And also you're really tight with this gray area, which is storage. So in comparison to building a website, you build some JavaScript and then you have like quick feedback and you can basically mock everything. You don't need really production data. And so that's basically dependency can really slow down, the whole cycle. And so we have today basically um, AI copilots that help us to write code faster. We saw it with Archie and Cursor. And classically, the steps is you write a prompt, right? And then the AI is going to generate it codes. And then you're going to have to test that code against that dependency, which is data. And so this loop can be quite painful, especially if like the AI is making a mistake, obviously. So you kind of reprompt and then you test it. And so the question is how you can, lower this feedback loop. And the answer is basically with MCP. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and you may have seen it all the rage around. And you can see it basically where you give your LLMs a certain plugging action that it can action to do something. And here it can execute queries, read the result, and interpret the result accordingly. So basically, instead of you kind of like going and test the code, the query, he can, directly by himself, if you give the proper access and you have the proper MCP for a given database, execute the query and do it. So this is a small demo basically that I'm going to show you. Here is a prompt. It's pretty extensive, but basically I have a couple of different sources of data. So it's like really the ingestion part where I do have API source from GitHub, Stack Overflow, and I provide, S3 Parquet, file path, Hacker News. And then I say, extracts the data from there into DBT project folder and give me some insight with a model. So here, let's go over quickly the demo video here. But so basically, it's going to load. I think it should be better quality now. But basically, I'm in Cursor. In Cursor, you can set up MCP. And so there is an MCP for MotherDuck and DuckDB. So here I'm going to use it for, just starting for DuckDB. And DuckDB behind the scene is going to query the S3 file for me. So the model is going to be able to query the data for me and do this iteration where he kind of try the schema and define the query. So here I pass the prompt I just give you before. I'm just gonna speed it up. And as you can see here, what is interesting is that it's prompting the MCP. So you say, hey, I can read from S3 and basically execute that query directly. Would you like me to do it? Yes. So I do it. So he figure out the query what needs to do, to explore the data, you get the results, and then now you can, define specific query, which is basically the feedback loop you do as a data engineer, as a person, where you're gonna inspect the source data, then write the data. And you see here, he's gonna do mistake. Actually, he's gonna, try to filter by year, which is here an integer, but it's actually a string. So we'll come back how to work around those things because he kind of like directly query the data. But you see, it's basically just this feedback loop going on where he's exploring the data. And then after that is creating my my DBT model. So you see I have on the right side a couple of staging models that's been created and it's validated. It's already been run, to the MCP. So I don't have to really just do this back and forth step to try it out. Is gonna work straightforward. Another thing I wanted to show is that you can also ask it to provision the data directly in MotherDuck with this MCP. Everything was working locally, and so I asked, can you load actually all this data that you've generated, the staging table directly in MotherDuck? And so that's what is happening here. Again, so I'm just clicking yes for the MCP, and then I can go to the MotherDuck UI and I see my staging data that has been there, and I can do manual exploration if I want. So so roughly, basically, the key takeaway here is the timer. The key takeaway here is that you can optimize your workflow in different ways. First, you can share the LLMs.txt. A lot of documentation websites provide LLMs.txt, which is a new standard to basically be more AI friendly. So if you pass this single link, you have all the documentation up to date from MotherDuck. Okay, DuckDB is also working on this LLM.txt. There is a lightweight version with links. You can add specific rules. You can say recommending validating queries to the MCP. You can create local sample data, and you can also, ask him to describe the table instead of trying to querying directly and have a failure. So just describe the schema, get the right schema, so that the integer and string issue that we saw just before doesn't happen. So you have the MCP, which is on GitHub for DuckDB and MotherDuck. I would recommend you to play around. We have Cursor. That's a great thing to try. And that's it for me.
Oops. Awesome. Thanks, Mehdi. I was on mute there. That was really cool. Really appreciate you sharing that. I have more to come. I will plug that I'm doing more than just a vibe SQL that actually works as a workshop, also a data council in about 2 weeks here. So definitely going to build a lot on a lot of the workflows and things that have been shown today. I'm super excited. Great timing here so that we can all kind of share some ideas. So, these are all really excellent, fascinating use cases. I think so for our first kind of question here, what I'm thinking about is, like, what is one unexpected benefit or a surprising challenge that you encountered when you were integrating AI, into your workflow that you didn't really talk about in your talk? And so on this one, we'll start with Mehdi.
Yeah, so LLMs are really smart at like generating code for data engineer and best practice, but like the actual human workflow is kind of like not there. So the example I gave in the demo is that, it's a model. It's like, okay, let me try to query, it's failed. I'm trying again, right? But actually, a senior data engineer would say, okay, I don't need to query this file. It's a Parquet file. With a described table, the query is faster. I get the right schema, and then I can, be sure my next query will not fail. So like guiding basically those LLMs with like proper data engineer behavior workflow was kind of like unexpected, but kind of also normal. They're really good at generating code,
Yeah.
but the way that they're gonna iterate is a bit different than, like, I would say, a human workflow.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, I was working on something the other day where I needed to convert a schema to XML, and I just asked the LLM to do it, and I kind of reflected on that later, and I was like, oh, that was kind of a weird thing to have just the AI just do the conversion. Anyways, Evelyn, what about you? Like, what were some surprising challenges that you encountered when kind of, tackling these problems?
Yeah, actually, Nate kind of touched on this one, where basically when we were creating the description process, we found out that LLMs were actually too compliant and too nice in their responses. They were too indirect. So basically, we had the same problem Nate had, where we're like, return a response in the following JSON and only return that JSON. And then it was always like, here's the response you requested, here's the JSON. Even providing examples and asking it to check its work didn't work. So we actually had to write some Python extraction to get only the JSON using regular expressions. But yeah, unfortunately, it's too eager to help. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely I've heard that Gemini Pro is a little bit meaner. I haven't tested it yet, but something to keep in mind. I do think they're very compliant, and it's really hard when you're trying to negative prompt, like, don't do this, or shape it a little bit. It's really good framing. By the way, we will see if we have time for Q&A at the end. If you want to drop it, there's a Q&A section in the bottom of your Zoom chat. Just drop your questions in there, and then we'll try to get them. We'll try to get them at the end. Archie, what kind of surprising challenges or benefit that you've seen in doing this? You're muted, Archie.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just trying to think of a unique one because I think hallucination is probably the most obvious, but kind of least interesting one. I'd say it's like picking choosing the right time to like reach for an LLM tool. I sometimes like spin my wheels for longer than I should, trying to like prompt engineer my way to a solution, when there is just a better way, which is often like going and reading the docs of the thing you're trying to use, which, you know, you're just like hoping that the LLM has enough context about to kind of to generate. But so often, like you realize you've been like 15 minutes in and you just like installed the tool the wrong way to begin with because the LLM was like, just pip install it. And you're like, oh, great, pip install. And then you find that like pip install is not the right solution. So yeah, I think that would be my one.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think like, you know, one thing I've noticed kind of in my workflows is, especially when you're using kind of like newer libraries that aren't like hydrated in the training data set. And even if you add them to like the docs in Cursor or Windsurf, as like a rag step, sometimes you just need to read the docs. I've definitely done the, hey, let's iterate on this prompt for 30 minutes and then go read the docs. And it's like, oh, here's the exact syntax of the thing I needed. So yeah, totally feel that one. Yeah, and then I saw you Mehdi, yeah, don't do pip. UV is already installed. I'll just do a quick shout out. UV is amazing with LLMs. It simplifies a bunch of workflows. There was a comment earlier in the chat like, hey, how do you guys think about Python MCP? And I haven't thought about it, and that's just because UV has been so good at running local Python that I haven't really needed to kind of reach out. But obviously, you know, for those of you who are kind of in the Python world, we've all spent so long wrestling our environments that some of that stuff is second nature. So anyways, it's definitely been a fun kind of adventure figuring out how to connect those. Nate, do you have anything to add here to this?
The one thing I'll add is when I made the industry piece, it was designed to be like an ad hoc thing. I probably should have expected this doing analytics for so long, but it was like so popular. It's like, okay, can we do sub industry? How about by SIC codes? How about that? And it became like, how do I productionalize this? So that's if like when you make a useful thing, it all of a sudden you're like, wait, is this my job now? So anyway, that's like the one piece that was like, I should have expected it in hindsight, but that's the challenge. Is like, how do you productionalize this like SQL code I wrote in Snowflake into something that's like useful for the team? So that was a big piece for me.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, I think the other part of that too is like, you know, especially if you're using it kind of in like DBT models, for example, making sure you're not just like prompting, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of rows every DBT run, right? Like actually you have to be a little bit more intentional with your incremental builds if you're going to use something like AI in the loop, you know, in your runs, which I think is, I think it's intuitive like once you do it, but like, you know, it's a kind of a forcing function there. So really interesting, Nate. Let's connect some dots here. So hearing each other, are there common principles or some key differences in how you evaluate, validate, and ultimately trust the output of the AI tools you're using across your workflow? Evelyn, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think throughout the talks we've heard that gathering enough metadata and iterating on your results is pretty important. If you're just starting out using AI, I would caution you to not trust the first result it gives out and publish that. But either iterate on it and have a human in the loop, or make sure you have enough metadata and provide enough context that it can give a decent-ish result. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely true there. Like a lot of what I found too is that like when you start down this road of asking these questions, and then you of course discover, oh, if I had this set of metadata, but we didn't collect it, so now you gotta go back to the start and, you know, continue the process. It's definitely challenging from that perspective. Totally agree there. Archie, what do you think?
I think something I found is picking the right model is surprisingly important sometimes. So I haven't. I would not consider myself like an expert in the AI ecosystem, but every now and then you kind of come across a thing that, my default choice, probably like a lot of people's for a while, has been to use OpenAI products, and their models, because they've been quite performant for like what I've been trying to do. But more recently, I was trying to generate code from, but without like just generate code. Don't generate like comments. Don't generate introduction. Don't generate like markdown to explain what you're doing. That kind of thing. And like have it generate code that's right first time, and generate code that's really fast. And after a little bit of research, I actually found that Mistral's like CodeStral model, which they released kind of end of last year, beginning of this year, much better at this. Like I would say an order of magnitude better. Like it never produces markdown, like explaining what's going on. And it's very good at the like, I think 18 or 20 languages that it's been like specifically trained on. It's very excellent at. So picking the right model is sometimes a good thing to do, and it's kind of can be a bit overwhelming because there's so many sort of large tech companies shipping models at the moment. But there's that classic internet research task of like finding the 10 Reddit people saying when what they were trying to do and which models they've tried, and then you try a couple of them and find out. The model name was Mistral. It was called CodeStral, CodeStarl. And yeah, it's specifically designed to generate code.
Cool.
It's quite nice. You can try it for free. They have like if you log in and create a Mistral account, if you're using it kind of just for like within your own IDE environment, you can just get a key for that, and it's in beta at the moment, so you don't need to be worrying about the credits.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do think that you hit on something really interesting there, which is, at least for me, as I've been, using AI more and more, like being able to, I'm gonna say like do on the fly evals for the specific problem you're solving is like actually really important and very annoying. Like depending on the context of the question you're asking, different models can be better. For example, when I'm doing what I would call like typical product manager type work, like, hey, I'm going to define a spec for something I want to build. Chat GPT or GPT-4o is amazing, but when I try to implement, the code in Cursor with 4o, it doesn't work well. Whereas like Claude just works better in that case. And it's like, why are these like this? How do you know this? It's been super challenging. Becoming an expert in like doing eval or something like on the fly. Anyways, Nate, what about you? Like, how do you kind of think about this, especially in the context of like being in, like GDM, like go to market facing team?
Yeah, for me, and this came up, Evelyn, as well on yours, is the skepticality of the output. It can look really reasonable. Like in my case, the industries look super reasonable, and being skeptical of it, I think is something, if you've been in analytics for any amount of time, you've learned that a bit. But with these, they can look really good, and it's like, okay, you got to remember date partitions here, and you might not think about that. And so the temptation is to think it solved the problem. Let me move on to other stuff with documentation, or in my case, with filling out the industry information. So that's the line I see being common is it's really tempting to think it's solved, but you have to have an extra attention to skepticality, I think, with the results you get.
Yeah, totally. Especially because they're so compliant, right? Just like, hey, wow, you're so smart. Like, thanks for telling me that. Like, yes, obviously you were right.
They butter you up every time. You're like, okay, I'm like,
please stop.
Lay it off. Yeah,
please stop. It's very funny. All right, it's very, very good. So obviously our workflows have all kind of changed quite a bit. As we figured out how to integrate AI into our workflows. It's not just about speed, right? So I guess my next kind of set of questions here is like, how has incorporating these tools shifted the skills you rely on most? Like, are you spending less time in certain tasks and more on others? How are you thinking about that? Archie, why don't we start with you on that?
Yeah, I think the like biggest shift for me has been taking up less of my team's time for things that are outside of my comfort zone. So we have a pretty small team here, but we're split kind of mainly between like go-to-market side and the engineering team. And engineering's a like pretty precious commodity in any business that has an engineering function. But I after getting stuck on something, like I think if you'd talked to me like a couple of years ago, like my main point of resolution would have been like, okay, like I'm gonna go, either block half an hour in someone's diary later, in their calendar later, or go knock on their door and say, hey, can you help me with this thing? They're almost certainly, they're always going to say yes, or pretty much always going to say yes, even if they're like in the middle of their flow doing something else. But I think it's given me like a better chance of like self-resolving. Like I'd say I probably like 50, it's probably reduced the amount of things I ask them by like 50%, which is pretty nice. Having said that, nice of them. Having said that, that does often mean that I do things that are wrong. I have like higher confidence in like the things that I do, because I have like super analyst working for me. So it'd be kind of nice if your team could have visibility on like the things that they don't ask you. You know what I mean? So you can like intercept later. You see all the things your team are asking to the AI agents, and you'll be like, no.
Yeah. That's so true. Like definitely, especially when you're getting into a domain that maybe you're less familiar with. Like I don't really know a lot about front end, but our docs are built at MotherDuck in DocuSource, which is based on React. And so sometimes you need to get kind of into the guts a little bit, and that's something that now I can do by myself, right? Like I'm not reaching out to someone on our front end team being like, hey, I don't know React very well. How do I change this thing? I just, can hop into it and do it. Although, is the implementation ideal? I kind of look at it and say, I don't know. Like, okay, then maybe I'll ask for review. But I think knowing to ask for review is also hard, and that is also takes a lot of time. So figuring out how to do that is really interesting. Nate, what about you?
So the main piece for me is I spend less time code smithing, which I think is true for most of us. It's the key for me is to take a breath and understand the patterns that I should be using. Like a good example is the UV setup, right? Like it's going to have you just dive into just advice on how to set up your environment on your computer. I was just doing that this week as I'm in a new job, need to set up environments and things. And so taking a pause for myself to understand and take time to read how others are, like the patterns of work they use when setting up their environments or different tasks to run. That's the key for me is my temptation just to get into code. And so to understand patterns, that's been the shift for me that I focused on before, but it seems even more important now with LLMs.
Yeah, totally true. I find myself definitely especially when I'm working on like more complex features is like, I'll just jump into like coding it. And then sometimes I just have to throw that away and then spend some time iterating on what my prompt is. And then I've one shot multiple hard problems that way. But like, it's been a hard lesson to learn. Like, like don't just solve it. Like think about it first. And, especially because it's like, we have all this power available. I can just start working on it. And sometimes, the work is not the same shaped the same. Mehdi, what about you? How do you kind of think about this?
Yeah, I think the downside effect, like I join Archie and you that, you may need less time or occasion to ask your teammate about something, like it really unblock you to move forward. Not necessarily like with the perfect solution, but then the question is like, how do you actively collaborate as a human, right? To like not start to be a mono project where we just all, just work with our AI agent. I think that's the biggest challenge today. I haven't, got an answer. I just, notice kind of like the problem where I do less pair programming. I do, less reach out that kind of enable me to pick the brain of others, because I kind of like move most of the things by my own, but that doesn't mean that others have, valuable inputs. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, totally. And
Can I just pick up on that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Briefly, Jacob? Yeah,
Mhm.
I think something that we noticed. So we're a pretty small team, but we take summer interns most years, and I think something that we noticed was that because of the way that AI had shifted our like working styles, we probably weren't giving our interns enough support in their like initial stages, and they were probably ripping with AI tools as well, but your ability to use those outputs as someone who's quite junior and inexperienced is probably somewhat lower than someone who's had more time to use them. So I think we had to like be a bit proactive about that and be like, actually for these people who are just with us for like a few months, we should be more actively making sure that they have time to ask us questions and to like work with our more experienced engineers so that they get value out of their time with us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And Evelyn, do you have anything to add in terms of how you're, spending time differently, now that you have AI tools in your workflow?
Yeah, just to kind of follow on everyone, it's a shift to reviewing code rather than writing it. I would encourage, if you're a junior, to write your code first and then have ChatGPT review it. So do it the other way around. Otherwise, you might not, your learning ability will diminish significantly if you use AI too much. And that's important if you're junior. So I would encourage you to ask AI to check your work rather than generate your work if you're a junior.
Yeah, that's a great way to like turn it around and learn. I've definitely found it effective, especially when I'm kind of operating in areas where I'm less familiar, to say like, hey, explain explain this code to someone who is an expert SQL user, and it will, helpfully use metaphors and things that I'm more familiar with. This is actually kind of a funny trick that's very helpful with me in understanding Python. But yeah, totally makes sense. It's definitely you want to make sure that you're learning the parts that a human can do well, and the synthesis bits, and being able to think critically where an LLM or a Gen AI type model can't do it. So we're coming close to time here. I do actually want to get some time. There's been some really good chat. I do want to get some time for questions. If you all have questions in the Q&A, we're going to hop into that from here. Unless any of the panelists here have something really, really pressing that they wanted to answer in those last questions that we had framed out, I'm happy to give you some time. Otherwise, we can hop into some a Q&A here.
But I just wanted to pick on the last topic because I found it interesting to make an analogy with the cloud era. So before, when you started, your data career and big data career, you had to learn about network, how distributed system works, how SQL engine works. And with the cloud, appearing, a lot of abstraction has been done for you. And then when it's not working, or just grasping all those components are working behind the scene, you're using a TNAV. It's actually Presto behind the scene that's been developed there, which has specifically, SQL on-read schema features. And so the analogy I wanted to make is with chatbot. It's again a level of abstraction, and if you don't learn the fundamental, it's going to be again much harder to learn and to fix things. So I do believe that it's even more important today is to learn those fundamentals, like as we saw it before the cloud and now with AI. Otherwise, people are really gonna get lost when things is gonna go sideways, and it's gonna go sideways, right? So
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like the fundamentals still are important because at some point your abstraction breaks, and when it does break, it can be super challenging to fix. For any of you who have like deployed on like Netlify or Vercel, it can definitely be a little bit of a black box. And I've built some things and put them out into the world on those sites, and they're really, really nice abstractions. But on the flip side, like when things go wrong, you can't really peer inside it, and or maybe you have to know your error messages and where to go and how to search for them and things like that. So all right, so we did have a question in the Q&A panel here. I see Mehdi is typing an answer here. Mehdi, do you just want to take that one verbally here?
Yeah, I think Evelyn might have a better answer, but I think it's mostly just getting your LLMs relevant metadata, right? So I think LLMs can, interpret it, a column description and a column that, their goal based on the data itself. But I think, if it's just Boolean, for example, it's really hard to kind of like interpret it with just the column name and the value. So you definitely need, external, output data. I'm sure, Evelyn, you want to take that?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, definitely, like you said, you can't just rely on the column naming. You need to make sure all your lineage is in place. So the LLM can take into the context. The other thing I will say is that you cannot use LLMs to generate description for your source data. It won't work because like if you upload a CSV, it has the context. So I would encourage you to have, if you are uploading a new data set or creating a new Postgres table, create descriptions for those manually and then have the LLM ingest everything downstream. Otherwise, you're in a world of hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think getting the right metadata and context is so important, and this really highlights it, especially because once you have all those pieces, you want to connect the dots, and it needs to be right. And everyone, as you mentioned earlier, like just more time reviewing, right? We had one last question here that Mehdi had answered that I'll just verbally address, which is what have you experienced with giving non-technical engineers users the ability to vibe query against your company's data? Really, really interesting question. Obviously, we have a sort of biased opinion on the MotherDuck side, which is we have some functionality around prompt SQL, where you can ask natural language questions and get a SQL query back, or even run the query yourself. I think the real thing is like a sandbox, which I think is what Mehdi said here. Like, what kind of playground can you enable this in? And again, I'll talk the book a little bit here, which is DuckDB is an excellent way to give a sandbox of data to end users and have them have a fast experience. Is it perfect? No, it's just one way. There's a lot of ways to solve this problem. But really it becomes, hey, like where do you have a playground with the storage you need and the compute you need? Yeah, really good. Thanks for answering that, Mehdi. All right, I think that's all we have for today. I really appreciate time from the group here. Panelists, really thank you for your time, and attendees, thank you for the great questions and interaction. We will follow up and share this with everybody. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to continuing to drive discussions around what it looks like to use AI and data together, and what that means for all of us. So thanks, everybody.